Hey everybody, welcome back to a brand new episode of Psychedelic. Got a great episode for you today. We got Mitchell Gomez on the pod, Executive Director at DanceSafe. And if you don't know what DanceSafe is, you will by the end of this episode. I hope you go check them out. DanceSafe is an amazing organization promoting harm reduction, non-biased, factual, truthful education, and promoting health and safety within the electronic music community. They're a peer-based organization. They have tons of volunteers. Go check them out, dancesafe.org. Test your drugs, folks. There's a lot of stuff going around, and you don't know what it is. And so these guys are doing it's an amazing service that they're providing. And yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation. I really like Mitchell. He's a great guy. You guys are going to love him too. And yeah, got to take care of some business before we get moving on. And that is, let's see, what do we got? Announcements, things, stuff. Well, I got DanceSafe on my website. I decided to make like a list of resources. I get a lot of messages from people about where to go, what to do. Hey, can you identify this mushroom for me or whatever? Go to the Shroomery, man. Go to Arrowhead. There's a lot of places. And not that I can't help, but I'm crunched for time. I want to be involved in so many things. I wish I could, like that movie Multiplicity where I almost said Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton clones himself. It's a really stupid movie, but I wish I could clone myself because I just want to be involved in so many things. But having said that, I decided to make a list of resources on my website. So if you go to the website, you go to recommendations, you hit that tab, go down, resources and links, along with a number of other things. I got books in lists, I got documentaries, I got clips, talks, lectures, I got all kinds of stuff because, number one, it's kind of fun making lists, actually. I never really realized the joy of listicle-ing. And, yeah. So go check that out, and DanceSafe is up there, and all of a bunch of resources. And if you see anything that should be added there, let me know, because I'm always down to add more resources and links to help people, point people in the right direction. All right, so I also have a new section on the website called Flow Sessions. It's kind of in construction, but the point of it is, like I said, I'm involved in a lot of things, and I'm always kind of out and doing many things, and people are always sending me books, and they want to be on the podcast, and this and that, and I love it all. I love it all. And I love when you guys send me messages. Sometimes some of the messages you send require a longer, more thoughtful response. And in the past, I think I was able to kind of carve out a little bit more time. I wasn't as busy. But moving forward, I decided, what if I offered something, that could really help people in the way that I think could help people. And that way is by talking, by just free-flowing talking, having a one-on-one mind jam with Psychedelic himself, and I'm calling it Flow Sessions. And the reason why I'm calling it that is because when I do the solo cast, I get into a flow state. I haven't done a solo cast in a while, and I'm like itching to get on one. So the next one is going to be epic. I guarantee it. I'm just building up. It's like it's like a dam, just like building and building. And it's about to burst. So I'm ready to unload some mind flow and surf the cosmic waves of my neurons into your ear holes pretty soon. And so I want to do that for you guys. I want to do that for anybody that just wants to, so many times in our lives we find ourselves not being able to really express ourselves, fear of being judged or being stupid, or, like maybe we don't have the time or whatever the reason is, but getting into a state of flow, trusting your thoughts and trusting what you're saying to really just let it all out, let the conversation go where it goes. So these are going to be really long stretches of time, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is. And I'll work it on like a sliding scale pretty much. So I haven't set it up, but if you're interested, just go to the contact form on my website, contact me. I'm still in the process of setting all this up. That being said, if you need more of a professional to take care of you and give you some better maybe coaching advice, my partner Jenna is I always tell people, she's a life coach, and since we got together, I was sort of like patient zero. I was her first unofficial real client. If she could help me, if she could improve my life, I guarantee she could help anybody. So her website is I Venture Beyond, and she specializes in transitions. And I really like what she's doing because she's really doing something that came from her personal experience. She worked in the corporate world for 7 years, and as a corporate coach, she's super smart and talented. And then we met at an ayahuasca center, and then she started teaching yoga, and then going on offering hikes, and dieting plant medicines. And so she's got a lot to offer. So if you find yourself stuck, if you find yourself like you might be wanting to have a transition in your life, contact her. Go to iventurebeyond.com. Mi partner, Jenna Sezional Basilicato. I feel like there should be like the third after that in a British accent. What else? I want to try. I want to speed this up because we want to get to the podcast. But I'll be presenting at the Denver Psychedelic Club, the Psychedelic Club of Denver, if you will, at Hooked on Colfax, talking about Daniel Pinchbeck's book, How Soon Is Now. Some of you might remember I had Daniel on the podcast, I don't know, episode 30 or 35, something like that. I just saw he has a new book coming out called When Plants Dream with Sophia Rucklin. I'm not sure if I pronounced her name right. It's kind of one of those things where I've never heard it before, but it looks like that's what it is. Anyway, going to be presenting that book. I think it's an important book. I don't totally agree with everything in the book, but I'm going to give my take on it and talk about how he's connecting a lot of dots. And I love dot connecting and dot connectors. And then I was just on a panel for this Psychedelica series by Gaia, hosted at the Alamo Drafthouse on Sloan's Lake, put on by Good Cinema and hosted by Megan from Vinyasa Productions and Medicinal Mindfulness. So go check out those things as well. Jenna will be on the next panel about ayahuasca, so that's coming up. What else? Yeah, if you like the show, you know what to do. Just tell people about it. Share it, subscribe. That helps. And if you want to go a step further, you can leave a 5-star rating and review, or just a 5-star rating. Just click those 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. That really, really helps because it's the largest podcast directory, the most popular one, and it lets everybody know, hey, people like this show. Like, this is good. So do that. If you don't like the show, message me. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. Tell me I'm an idiot, I'm fat, whatever. Just I can handle it, man. Give me the brutal, honest truth. I only want that, and I try to give that to you guys on the show all the time. So then if you want to go even further in your support, this is an independent show. I'm competing with a lot of shows with big money and resources and power, and here I am sitting in my living room with a Shipibo tapestry on a fold-out beer pong table with some foam crates hanging above my head. So please send a couple of Federal Reserve notes over to Mr. Mikeadelic here at patreon.com/Mike Brank. That's MikeBranc. If you can, you get all kinds of cool rewards, stickers, buttons, magnets, t-shirts, and you get to join the Inner Sanctum WhatsApp chat group where people from all around the world are talking, connecting, sharing trip reports, telling stories, getting vulnerable, real, raw, all the good things I like. Shout out to everybody in that group. I love each and every single one of you. And I think that's it. So my website, mikebrank.com. Go there, check out all that stuff I mentioned. Transitional coaching by my partner Jenna, I Venture Beyond. And let's get started with the show, folks. This is a good one. This is a real good one. I'm really happy to have Mitchell on and to know him, and I hope to continue to keep in contact with him, chat with him, hang out with him, and have him back on the show. So, without further ado, the Executive Director at DanceSafe, Mitchell Gomez.
Psychedelics are illegal not because a loving government is concerned that you may jump out of a third-story window. Psychedelics are illegal because they dissolve opinion structures and culturally laid down models of behavior and information processing. They be open to us the possibility that everything we know is wrong.
We don't need new laws that control our consciousness and rigidly place it in a prison.
Cognitive liberty. The fact that as adults, if we're not hurting anybody else, we should have the right to explore the contours of our own consciousness without any mediation or legislation on the part of somebody else.
Reject authority. Authority is a lie.
Voice of perception.
Information is power, but we have to seize the opportunity. The opportunity.
Yeah, man, thanks for coming over. I appreciate it. This is it's not quite yet, the Joe Rogan level studio here. I don't have scientists shooting crossbows or anything.
Yeah, no flamethrowers anywhere.
No flamethrowers, nothing like that. But yeah. Yeah, we had a pretty interesting talk over there before, and so every time I'm talking with someone who's interesting, it's always like, wait, let's save it for the podcast. But obviously, we can cover some of that stuff that we were talking about again. But I should start off by just saying, I really appreciated what you said that was, I think, the first time I heard you speak at Good Cinema when I was there, and I just really connected with what you were saying, what you were talking about, drug war, cognitive liberty, and those sorts of things, and of course, DanceSafe is doing the best thing that anybody could possibly do, and maybe I could let you explain what that is.
Yeah, sure. So a little bit of background. DanceSafe was started in the late 90s in the West Coast rave scene. Basically focused very, very tightly on the issue of MDMA misrepresentation. So there were pills going around that DanceSafe's founder knew were not MDMA, and so he realized there was ways that you could chemically test for these. The government of, I believe, either Belgium or the Netherlands had started doing pill testing. And his original plan was basically to create a sort of media stink around drug checking and hopefully legalize the service. So the plan was basically to get arrested doing drug testing and then to use that arrest as a way to legalize the service. Despite his best efforts and despite mine, nobody's ever managed to get arrested doing drug checking. Law enforcement generally is very supportive of harm reduction now. They understand harm reduction. And DanceSafe's mission has really expanded to be sort of a larger, holistic harm reduction outreach organization. So we do a lot of things now that are not involving drugs at all. We give out hundreds of thousands of condoms every year. My basement right now is actually solid condoms. It's like walls of condoms. We give out free water, non-biased drug information, electrolytes, earplugs, all sorts of harm reduction things that are needed within the scene. But the core of our mission really still is about, consent education. That's become a bigger and bigger piece every year. But really the core of the mission is about drug misrepresentation. It's about mitigating the harms, not just of substance use, but harms that are directly created by government policy. And that's actually the reason that I'm so interested in policy change, in ending prohibition, in pushing these ideas of cognitive liberty, because really most of what we do is not mitigating risks of drugs, it's mitigating risks of drug prohibition. Misrepresentation kills a lot of people with the fentanyl crisis now. I'm pretty comfortable at this point saying that drug misrepresentation now kills more people than drugs. It's more than the, people taking a drug they thought was the drug they were taking and dying is now the minority of drug deaths.
Right.
Because we now have more fentanyl deaths than heroin deaths, and most users are not intentionally using fentanyl. They're attempting to either use heroin, and now more and more frequently we're seeing fentanyl show up in cocaine, in methamphetamine, in non-opioid drugs. Lots and lots and lots of fake opioid pharmaceuticals out there are actually just fentanyl, often very unevenly pressed. And so, what we're talking about is the exact equivalent of the people in the 1930s who died drinking black market alcohol and then, either died or went blind from methanol poisoning. It's not just a parallel situation, it's the identical situation. Right. And so, that's really what we're doing, is trying to end these misrepresentation and adulteration deaths that are created by our decision to outlaw these drugs.
Yeah. Right. And so, the decision to outlaw these drugs, and then obviously people are going to do what people do. And then people that want to help people and create change do what you do. And it's like, if we didn't have this prohibition, maybe you'd be more integrated into the mainstream model, which would be great. I could imagine like if people were going to McDonald's and getting burgers that they thought were hamburgers, but they wound up being like rat poison. I mean, that would be a huge level of concern, although that is above ground. It'd have some kind of black market McDonald's slinging. Right.
Well, I mean, that's sort of the crux of the issue, right? Is that the solution to this is the creation of legal regulated markets. And then in terms of what we do, we can just focus on education. I often say that realistically, most of what DanceSafe does should be provided by county health departments. Right? You should be able to take your drugs to a county health department. They should be able to run them through not just reagent testing, but laboratory, GCMS or FTIR testing, tell you what they are, and then hand them back to you.
Yeah.
Or in an even better world, just go to the drugstore, right, and buy.
Can you explain what that is? Reagent?
Yeah, of course.
The laboratory?
Yeah. So reagent testing is primarily what DanceSafe does. It's small chemical droppers. You basically scrape a tiny sample off of whatever it is you're planning on consuming. Make several little piles out of those scrapings and then test each pile with a different reagent test. Those reagents change color based on the primary composition of the substance you're testing. And then you compare them to a chart of known reactions, and you can get a pretty good idea of what's in that sample. Broadly, reagent testing is what you would call presumptive identification. So you can say this sample for sure does not contain mostly MDMA. And you can say this sample almost certainly contains an MDMA-like substance, but you can't be 100% sure that it's MDMA. There's always a statistical risk that some new sample, some new drug has been developed that matches the
some analog.
Testing. Right.
Yeah.
It's unlikely, but not impossible. And sometimes we have to develop new reagents to mitigate that. So our old MDMA test, there was a drug called 6-APB that was too similar on our existing MDMA test. And so we had to develop new reagents to figure out if something was MDMA or 6-APB. GCMS and FTIR, so gas chromatography mass spec or Fourier transformer infrared spec, those are positive identification. If the machine says that it's MDMA, it's MDMA. There's no way to misrepresent these machines. There's no way to trick them. You can't add something to the drug that's going to make the GCMS think that it's MDMA.
Right.
So from like a legal context, reagent testing would be good enough for the police to arrest you, but they would never go to trial without sending it to a state crime lab and getting GCMS done.
Right.
Because an attorney would come in and destroy reagent testing, right? They'd be like, oh, you don't even really know what these things are.
Yeah, but it's good for people because it's affordable.
Right.
These other methods require a lot of resources and money, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, a base level FTIR is roughly $40,000. A GCMS is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of twice that. The idea that like an end user is going to purchase one of these is insane.
Yeah.
DanceSafe is currently working on getting an FTIR.
Wait, you didn't see my lab over there?
Yeah. I mean, there probably are some in private ownership out there, but I don't know those folks.
Right.
If any of those folks are listening, please reach out. But yeah, we're fundraising for an FTIR. We do have some money set aside. We're going to be doing a big fundraising push next year to purchase an FTIR. There's a few different machines we're looking at, and we're basically just waiting to hear back from overseas partners who have these machines to see which ones they're liking best. Because in a lot of places, the governments are funding drug checking services. Colombia is actually getting ready to potentially institute a rule that any party of over like 1,500 people would be required to have drug checking harm reduction services on site. France, the UK, all over Europe, there's people who are getting major funding to do drug checking, and so they're buying these
Portugal,
machines.
right?
Portugal, Spain, a lot of places. And so we're lucky. We get to hear feedback on these machines without having to spend $100,000 to test the various machines.
Great, yeah.
But yeah, so reagent testing is certainly better than not reagent testing, right? If you're going to consume a substance, it's absolutely better to test it than to not test it. But laboratory analysis is also undeniably better than reagent testing. Although reagents are still used for some things. So for FTIR, for instance, because the amount of LSD on a piece of blotter paper is so small compared to the weight of the paper, the FTIR generally just reads the paper. So even people who have these FTIR machines are still using the Ehrlich's reagent to test LSD. And so the reagents are always going to have a place, particularly because, like you said, they're cheap and easy to deploy. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to put, 100 reagent kits in the hands of 100 people at a party, tell them to go test for their friends, and vastly reduce the number of adverse medical incidents or hospital transports.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It helped me. I thought I was getting LSD, and it was N-bomb, and what is it? NMOB.
Well, there's a bunch.
Yeah.
So there's 2,5-I and BOME.
Yeah, that's the
was
one.
The most common.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that drug has killed something like 60 people that we know of.
Yeah.
In what we would call totally normal doses, right? People taking one piece of blotter paper,
right,
and dying. And considering it's being sold as LSD, which is a drug that is literally non-toxic in the medical sense, there's no known fatal dose of LSD. To sell a drug that has that many deaths at very small doses as a drug that doesn't physiologically kill people is really horrific. I mean, that's a really horrible thing that people are doing.
Yeah.
It just has huge profit margins. And in a world where, 1 or 2% of people are incapable of experiencing empathy, huge profit margins are going to tempt some people to behave in very unscrupulous ways.
Yeah, but a regulated market can protect against that.
Right. I mean, that's the entire point of regulation. Yeah, I often joke that the greatest trick prohibitionists have ever pulled is calling prohibition drug control, right? Because what prohibition really is the abdication of drug control to criminal black markets. It gives all of the control to the people who are selling drugs in black markets. Drug control is when you go to a store and buy a beer that's 3.8%, you know with 100% certainty that it's 3.8% alcohol. It's gone through multiple levels of government regulation. These people have licenses that can be pulled if they misrepresent things.
Right. And it's really difficult to get a liquor license too.
Really difficult. And I would imagine an MDMA and LSD license will be even more difficult to get when we eventually have legal regulated markets. And so, what you've really done is given up all the control. And the fact that they call it drug control is really quite clever. Because it makes people really, how could we not want drug control, right? How could we not want drug control? How could we not want to do this?
Right.
And it's like, no, drug control is legalization. That's drug control, not this just sort of pretending that you're going to stop drug use and driving it all into the black markets.
The government's pretty genius when it comes to their marketing, right?
Yeah.
Propaganda.
Yeah, certainly the government, it's a Darwinian evolution of government systems, right? Like the governments that survived revolutions have gotten very good at quelling revolutions. And in this country, one of the primary ways that governments maintain this sort of societal control is through language and through, all of these anti-drug commercials have been shown over and over and over and over and over again to not reduce rates of drug use, right? All of these anti-marijuana commercials in the 1980s didn't change the rate of drug use at all. What they do is create a framework for talking about drugs. They create a societal framework for what is the sort of boundaries of acceptable discussion around substance use. And at that, they're very good, right? This idea that, the sort of famous, this is your brain on drugs really did create a way that even drug users think about drugs, right? Even drug users, you hear them say things like, "Oh, my friend fried his brain."
Right.
It's like that's literally not what's happening with drugs. That's literally not what they're doing. But it's created the language. It's created the framework that we use to talk about it.
Yeah. Just the repetition of it.
Yeah.
And just being exposed to that repetition over and over conditions you, primes you to think in that framework.
Right.
Like you said.
Right.
Yeah.
Advertising and government propaganda share a lot of things, but the primary thing they share is that they work.
Yeah.
Right. There's a reason that we spend billions and billions of dollars on advertising, or probably trillions.
The war on drugs is very effective, so to speak, for them, not for humanity.
Right. And if you look at the drug war from is it reducing drug deaths perspective, the answer is clearly no. I mean, we have a higher percentage of our population dying now from opioids than we did when you could buy heroin at the grocery store.
Right.
It was literally sold through the Sears catalog. You didn't even have to go to the store. You just sent off a check with, I need 3 pairs of pants, 2 shirts, I need a new hoe for the garden, and some heroin. And they would mail you those 5 things.
Yeah.
And more people die now from opioids than when that was the way they were sold.
Right.
And so clearly it doesn't work from that perspective. But from the perspective of increasing police power, increasing the surveillance state, eroding civil liberties, allowing them to seize assets,
civil asset forfeiture, the incarceration rates, like we were talking about before,
incarceration rates, private prison proceeds,
big money.
lot of money. I mean, trillions of dollars, right? And so it's very effective for a very small number of people who are getting very, very, very rich.
Right. Who happen to have all the control.
Right. And so, yeah, I mean, that's, in my mind, that's really what the drug war is about, because prohibitionists are a lot of things, but they're not stupid.
Right.
You can look at the outcomes of the drug war, and you can look at the money we're spending, and it's very difficult to come to any conclusion other than the one that this is not about stopping drug use.
How do we communicate to people that actually care, not these evil people at the top, but how do we push things forward to try and make change? Because like you said, it's not like oh, these knuckleheads just don't know, they're not educated, if they can only make the right decisions. They know, and it's pretty malevolent, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure if malevolent's necessarily the term I would use. I would say incredibly greedy.
Okay, sure.
These are people who care more about money than human lives.
Okay,
that's very clear.
Yeah.
I guess that's evil. I don't know. I think as soon as you start describing other people as evil, you start getting into patterns of thinking about them that just aren't helpful. Yeah, I don't know if there's an easy answer to that question. I really don't. I mean, we're talking about taking trillions of dollars away from people with a lot of power. The last time we did something like that was literally the Civil War, right? It was taking away, slaves weren't just people who were being incarcerated. They were the primary economic asset of the South. The slaves that we freed were literally worth more than anything else the South had. And we're talking about another sort of similar dynamic. We're talking about pulling trillions of dollars away from people who have a lot of money, a lot of power, and a lot of guns. And so I don't know if there's an easy solution here. But really the thing that ended alcohol prohibition was the Depression. We simply couldn't afford as a society to continue the model that existed. And that might sort of be the answer. I mean, we're talking about, the government this quarter is borrowing the second largest number they've ever borrowed. All of the economic metrics look really good right now, but they're all being propped up by super low interest rates and really heavy borrowing on the side of the government.
Right.
If you take away the ability for the government to do that, all of our economic metrics look pretty terrible right now.
Yeah, it's a house of cards.
Right. And one that's really predicated on the ability to borrow trillions of dollars at basically 0% interest. And that is not a sustainable system. And so at some point we're going to be talking about a massive correction, and that might provide us an opportunity to really have a conversation about what our prison system looks like.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think if we look at history, that's pretty much the way it goes, right? Wait for catastrophe, wait till it blows up in your face until people get motivated and do something.
Yeah, and it's super unfortunate that that's the dynamic. And I mean, that's the dynamic with most major social change, is that it does require a bit of chaos in order to move the needle. And that's just sort of the reality of humanity. As long as it's not affecting a person personally, it's really easy to ignore all sorts of things. It's really easy to ignore the fact that we have a higher percentage of our population in prison than any society in the history of the world.
Yeah. Yet we call ourselves the freest country on the planet.
Right. Freest country on the planet, but we have more people in boxes than the Soviets had in the gulags. I mean, literally.
Jeez, yeah.
Both in absolute numbers and as a percentage of population.
But we don't see it really. It's not like in our face on a daily basis for most
by design.
people.
Right, by design.
Right.
Yeah, it's very, very, very well concealed. And there's also a lot of issues of racial disparity and economic disparity that drives these things. When it was poor people of color using heroin, it was a scourge, it was a plague. And now that it's more middle-class white kids dying of heroin, suddenly it's a disease, it's a pandemic, right? The language changes depending on who is being affected
setting
by
that
these,
framework again. Yeah.
And weirdly, this also gives us opportunities to have conversations about what substance use and how we should deal with it and how we should, sort of mitigate these deaths. Every single person in this country who dies from taking fentanyl when they thought they were taking heroin died because heroin is illegal. And the more we can push that messaging, the more we can educate people about the fact that this is not the only model. I mean, Switzerland literally gives free heroin to heroin addicts, and those heroin addicts generally don't die. On a population level, there have been I think there's a small number of individuals who passed away in the program. On a population level, it's basically zero. Nobody dies. Heroin is dangerous intrinsically, but it's so much more dangerous under black markets because you don't know the dose, you don't know what you're taking. People are afraid to call 911. People are using alone because the drug is so heavily stigmatized. Yeah. And when it's not illegal, when their heroin was synthesized by Bayer Pharmaceutical and paid for by the government and given to them, they can literally just tell somebody, hey, I'm going to use this heroin. I need you to be here while I'm using it. Right. And there's no fear of like, oh, this person now might get charged with a homicide, right? If your friend ODs in your living room, you could end up being charged with murder, even if you didn't buy the drugs, even if you didn't give them the drugs, even. And so like people are terrified to provide social support for opiate use.
Yeah. And you were talking about the 30s alcohol prohibition and the increase in violent criminal gangs, because of these black markets. So violence increased, these gangs increased. So that's another part of the equation. It's not really directly about the substance itself, but about the surrounding aspect of the market that it creates.
Right. So I saw it worked out once that on a purely material resource basis, it's more expensive to produce refined sugar than it is to produce heroin. Right. Because you have to, sugar plants are very agriculturally intensive, right? They create a lot of pollution. You have to pump a lot of water in. They're really an intensive thing to grow. Poppies, in most parts of the world, you can just plant the poppies and ignore them and they grow totally fine, right? Yeah. And so the only reason sugar is cheap is that we subsidize it, right? We don't charge the sugar producers for the externalities of their agriculture. We don't charge them for the pollution they create. And so, and we give them cheaper water and we give them direct subsidies. So the only reason sugar is cheap is that we subsidize it. And the only reason that heroin's expensive is that we prohibit it. Every person who moves that substance from point A to point B needs to be paid for the risk they have taken, right? The people who are taking the raw opium and cooking it into heroin need to get paid a lot of money for that process because it's really risky. And so if you just like let the free market sort of be the free market, I actually think heroin would probably be cheaper than sugar. I really do believe that. And like that's insane that we've created trillions of dollars of black market profit from a drug that we could just literally for less money, we could just give the heroin out for free. And people hate that idea, right? They're like, oh, I don't want my tax money being used to give out drugs. And it's like, well, your tax money is already being used to deal with drug use. And we're talking about a net savings of like hundreds of trillions of dollars globally by just giving opioid dependent users. I mean, we're trying to move away from that addict language. It's so easy to slip into that. But people who are dependent on opioid use, it's literally cheaper just to give them free heroin. So like, why are we wasting tax money? Like, we're the fiscal conservative ones, the ones who want to give out free heroin. That's the fiscally conservative position. And then you get rid of all the tertiary crime, right? People are constantly saying, oh, if we legalize heroin, everyone's going to be robbing everyone to pay for their habit. It's like, no, like it's only expensive because it's illegal. Like the only reason this happens is because you've chosen to create an artificial scarcity. You've chosen to create this situation. And I'm not somebody who is a personal fan of opioids. I've personally had very, very close friends pass away from opioid use. And I mean, I've seen the damage that opioid use can do. I don't want to minimize those very real things. But so many of the things that we attribute to opioid use are because of opioid prohibition. I would say the vast majority. And also, even according to the DEA, something like 74% of people who try heroin never develop the DSM criteria for problematic use, which means 3/4 of all the heroin users out there are, just by the DEA's own statistics, recreational heroin users. We never talk about it like that. We never talk about those users because they're out of the 15% are the 15% that we really see. Right. And so we just don't
and
talk.
You see it in movies.
You see it in movies
things too, right? Everyone's always strung out, laying on the floor, big problems.
Right. The attorney who is opioid dependent and needs to use a little bit of heroin in the morning and a little bit at night to like get through the day, but other than that, has his life together. You don't see those users. You don't ever see them. Even other substance users don't know that their friends are that user, because people who will share, giant lines of cocaine and ketamine with complete strangers in the middle of a cow field somewhere will never talk about the fact that they're going to take an oxy to go to sleep that night, right? They'll never talk with even their closest friends about the fact that they're using opioids. Whereas they're just like, they'll pour white powder on a table for strangers because it's such a heavily stigmatized drug. Yeah. And that's just the reality, is that's another effect of prohibition. The creation of this stigma makes the use more dangerous, both for the user and for society. It's not just about the user. Even if you never want to use these drugs, your entire civilization is being made more dangerous through drug prohibition.
Yeah, talk about a trickle-down effect. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and we were talking about people being greedy, and that's why that this is going on. But there's also a level of like fundamentalism too, right?
Sure.
Because, you know, we're talking about giving people drugs, and that I'm all for that. I think that's a smart, safe thing to do. But obviously, you've heard a lot of the arguments against that, right? So what are people typically saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the really important things to remember about the drug war and about the United States in particular is that the people who founded this country, there were several different sort of schools of thought that came into the founding of this country. There were the Native American sort of school of self-governance was actually really important. The Iroquois Confederacy was a really foundational part of our government.
Yeah.
There were the Hispanic Catholic settlers coming in, you know, to what is now Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. But the government systems were really created by the two main schools of thought were people who were from the Enlightenment, people who were, rationalists, generally called themselves deists, but if you read their private writings, were very clearly atheists. And then Puritans, right? And so it's important to remember that there was an actual Puritan sort of school of thought within this country that's never really died out. And prohibition is really at its heart a Puritanist policy, right? It's this idea that people who are enjoying something should be punished.
Right.
You should be punished if you're
You should
enjoying
be working and take pride in your work.
Right. And these are the people who don't want to give out condoms in high schools because if kids just don't have condoms, clearly they won't have sex. Right. They want to do abstinence-only education. They want to close down Planned Parenthood. They want to, and just say no about drugs, right? And those are all sort of the same underlying attitude. It's this idea that if something is enjoyable, there should, at a bare minimum, there should be risk to that enjoyment, or maybe outright punishment. Maybe we should punish you if you enjoy things. Yeah. And it's a really, really, really strange dynamic if you weren't raised in it. And I wasn't. I wasn't raised in a sort of, fundamentalist Christian home. I was raised by very liberal Jewish parents. And so I don't have the sort of upbringing that lets me sort of understand that in my gut. But I'm sure a lot of your listeners were, and they do understand that in their gut.
Yeah.
And even if you think you fully escaped from your upbringing, it's really, really hard to escape that. And you'll hear it from substance users all the time, right? Oh, I support drug checking, but like we can't have safe injection facilities. Like we can't just like use taxpayer money to fund where people are going to shoot up their drugs.
Yeah.
It's like test kits and safe injection facilities are on a continuum of mitigating risks of substance use. They're not separate things. They're part of the same model for addressing substance use. And saying that you want the things that will make your drug use safer, but you want to ban the things that will make other people's drug use safer is like kind of messed up. Like it's not a great way to think about drugs, but it's a really, really common dynamic among substance users. Dennis McKenna coined the term pharmacachauvinism. So it's this idea that like my drugs are fine, but your drugs are evil and dirty and shouldn't be allowed. And then the term that I've tried to push as the opposite of that is molecular agnosticism, right? We just accept that molecules are molecules. They're not intrinsically good or bad. They're just molecules. They exist in nature and they exist in labs and they're out there. What matters is how people as individuals and societies integrate those substances, right? And if people are using drugs, even drugs that have potential serious problems, I don't care. I really don't. I fundamentally don't judge substance use. What I care about are deaths, hospitalizations, people who are having to go out and rob to support their dependency use, people who are getting sold drugs that aren't what they claim they are and they die. Those are the things I care about. And so a lot of times the pushback you really get from this idea of legalizing drugs is, well, aren't more people going to use drugs? And I think the answer is yes. I think it's a small increase. I think it's a much smaller increase than most people think it would be. For the most part, I think everyone who really wants to use cocaine can get cocaine today.
Right.
For the most part, everyone who wants to use heroin can go out and get their heroin.
Right.
And so I really don't think there would be this... People have this perception that there would just be this explosion of heroin use if we legalized heroin.
Oh,
it's like, you know what? Like... there could be a heroin store right next door to my house, and it would not change the amount of heroin I use at all, which is 0.
Yeah.
That's the amount I use. That's the amount I want to use.
Right.
People say, oh, aren't people just going to use as much heroin as they want? And it's like, I'm already using as much heroin as I want. 0. That's how much I want.
I think that was the perception with cannabis too. Moving from New York to here, people are like, oh, what are you you're just smoking all the time, just getting high? Is that why you're moving? They're like, look, there's a cannabis shop right across the street. I go there maybe like once every 3 weeks to a month, get a couple things. It's not increasing. And I remember this great moment from the 2012 presidential debates, or maybe it was 2008, I forget. Ron Paul in South Carolina was talking about heroin. And he's like, and obviously they framed the question in this way, Chris Wallace or whoever. So you're saying that you're in favor of legalizing heroin, Mr. Paul? And he's like, look, how many people here would shoot heroin? He's like, we don't need the government to tell us what to do and what not to do. He's like, and everyone started applauding. He's like, oh, I never thought heroin would get an applause here. It's like, no, freedom got an applause.
Right.
Liberty got an applause,
And that's really what it comes down to is fundamentally people either believe that each of us has the right to live our lives that we want to as long as we're not hurting others, or you don't believe that. And a lot of people think they believe that until you really push them on certain issues. A lot of people will claim, oh, I want to let people live their lives however they want. And then you start talking about, we always default to heroin. We probably shouldn't, but...
want to talk about mushrooms?
Yeah, let's talk about mushrooms.
Because working at the decriminalization effort here, even talking with people who use drugs, we're like, yeah, I mean, I like shrooms, but I don't think it should be legal. I don't think because then you're going to have people taking it, they're going to be driving, it's going to be crazy, people are going to be tripping all over. I'm like...
Right.
Really?
So driving on mushrooms is exactly as illegal now as it was before we decriminalized mushrooms in Denver, right? It did not change a single thing about driving on mushrooms.
Right.
I don't think... I mean, yeah, do people occasionally drive on psychedelics when they probably shouldn't? Yeah, I think that happens. I don't think it happens any more under legalization than it would not under legalization. I think it probably actually happens less, right? Because you can educate people about these things. You can teach them about how, what safer use looks like. You can teach them how to trip sit their friends so that when their friends are having a difficult experience, they don't feel the need to we need to go to a hospital. We need to go seek medical help.
Right.
And it's like, the reality is if your mushrooms were actually mushrooms, if they were properly identified, psilocybe mushrooms, your stomach is not physically large enough to eat a physiologically problemac dose.
Right.
You can't eat enough mushrooms to physically hurt yourself. Your stomach literally doesn't fit that.
15,000 grams.
Right. You just can't do it.
Right.
Even extracts, you could do pure psilocybin extract powder, and it would be very, very difficult to physically get enough of that powder into your system to hurt yourself physiologically. And so as long as you can teach people about mitigating the tertiary risks, right? If you think you can fly, try taking off from the ground.
Right.
Yes. You never see ducks catching elevators.
Yeah.
So all right, you think you can fly, buddy? I'm very excited to see this.
Yeah.
You're not getting on the roof.
Right.
No duck has to get on the roof. So let's see it. Let's see you fly. Teaching people about the dangers of driving. And thankfully technology is also mitigating some of this, right? It used to be that getting from A to B without a vehicle meant calling a taxi, and it was a whole thing.
Yeah.
It's so easy now.
You could just eat a bag of mushrooms, get in your Tesla, set it on auto drive.
Right. So maybe don't do that yet.
No,
I don't think
kidding.
Self-driving cars is quite legal yet, but we're getting there. But certainly, calling an Uber is easy.
Yeah.
And believe me, every Uber driver who's ever picked anyone up from outside of a rave at 3 a.m. knows that you don't have to be sober to get in an Uber. And so we've really technologically are moving in the direction of a society that is going to be able to integrate these things better. But really, this cannot be an individual project. The ability to properly integrate psychedelics into an individual person's life is something that literally millions of people have figured out. That's not the difficult part. That's something that actually, as a species, we're quite good at. If you go to the NSA or the Peyote Way Church, you'll see very young children eating peyote. These children have been tested as adults for, neurological all sorts of neurological and cognition tests, and there's no sign at all that even among young children using peyote causes any sort of neurological or cognitive issues. The opposite, actually. These people generally are a little better integrated psychologically. And so what we really need to talk about is societal integration of these substances, right? We need to talk about the fact that we are locking people up for decades or lifetimes for substances that don't have a known fatal dose. And on the same time, we're funding alcohol, right? As a society, we actually we support alcohol by lower tax rates for businesses, for lower tax rates for agriculture, where they're growing grain to produce beer. Like, why is a person who's growing a drug that kills so many people being funded by my tax dollars? Why is that happening?
Yeah, there you go. That's where your tax dollars are going.
That's where my tax dollars are going, is they're funding the agriculture that grows the barley to make the beer that kills far more people every day than LSD has killed since it was invented.
What is it? I think like 40,000, I think, alcohol-related deaths a year or something like that?
40 or 50, right. So let's ballpark that as a 9/11 every, 13, 14 days.
Jesus Christ, yeah.
Right. And so we're talking about big numbers, right? Big numbers of deaths being funded by our tax dollars. And the reality is, by legalizing psychedelics, we can almost certainly reduce the amount of alcohol use in our society.
Oh, definitely. My alcohol use has gone way, way down.
Right. And that's a really common anecdotal story, and also something that in the 1960s was studied quite extensively.
Oh, right. Yeah. Bill Wilson, right?
Sure. I actually have a first edition. So if you get the very first edition, the very first printing of the Alcoholics Anonymous guide, it talks about his own LSD use. And then it was pulled out by the second printing.
Oh, why'd they pull it out?
Because the perception against LSD had turned.
Right.
It was a medical wonder. And then Tim Leary starts giving it to all of his undergrads, and all of his undergrads start giving it out at parties. And, we could get into the whole sort of, Jan Irvin paranoia of that being funded by the government. I think that's very clear that the government had their own agenda around LSD. I'm not entirely sure what that agenda was. But yeah, it went from being this medical thing to being a drug, right? A street drug. And that changed the public perception. And so people stopped talking about that. I think it's the same, it's the same reason that Steve Jobs, said that doing LSD was one of the most important things he ever did in his life, and then never expanded on that. Like, how is the founder of Apple going to say that doing LSD was one of the most important things in his life and not explain what he was talking about?
It was enough for me to try it. Yeah.
Right. And Crick, who discovered the shape of the shape of DNA, the entire genomics revolution wouldn't have happened without LSD. Right. At least not the way it did. Eventually, I think somebody would have figured it out, but it didn't happen that way. Right. It happened because he was on LSD. That's the way it happened.
Yeah.
And so that's it. Like, our society exists the way that it exists because of psychedelics, period. Computers to genomics to everything that we see in our world that we really appreciate now, I don't think would exist the way that it does without psychedelics being widely used in the 1960s.
Right.
And I think in terms of a percentage of population, in terms of the number of people using psychedelics, I think right now we are in a bigger psychedelic renaissance than the 1960s. I think more people are using psychedelics now than ever used them during the height of the Summer of Love.
Yeah.
It's just not concentrated in one city.
Yeah.
It was so public in the Bay in the 60s. That's the only difference. It's distributed. It's distributed on college campuses, at festivals, in tech communities. This idea that you're going to have hundreds of thousands of people microdosing and none of them are going to decide to macrodose is insane.
Yep.
People are going to try these things at fully psychoactive doses.
I think that it's interesting that you brought that up, because I see a lot of parallels. It's just different. Like LSD was kind of the thing of the 60s. Now it's kind of more DMT, and you have this sort of, I like to think of like a sort of quiet, decentralized revolution happening. People in, like you said, at festivals or in their homes or apartments or parties, trying something, and the amount of research that you could do online, the amount of you can find out all this stuff, and there's so many great forums. So it's a very interesting time.
Yeah. And I mean, LSD will always have a very special place in my heart.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
But the reality is, in terms of like immediate change in people's lives, I actually see more of that from DMT than I do from LSD use. I think DMT tends to be more of a individually, I want to almost say destabilizing, but I don't mean that in a negative context. Transformative is probably the positive way of saying destabilizing. Yeah. You definitely see more sort of transformative experiences from both NN-DMT and certainly from 5-methoxy-DMT, Toad. I mean, people make major life changes after trying 5-MeO-DMT. I mean, and now Mike Tyson's out there saying like, oh, I never want to hurt him. Like really, he's a different person.
Yeah.
He seems like a very different
seeping
person.
into the culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
I would very much like him to talk about some of his own past acts of violence. I mean, he's a convicted sexual assault, or it might have even been a rape conviction, right? Yeah. If he's really gotten to the point now where he believes that we're all one thing and that we should be helping the world. I'd like to see him address some of his past decisions. I'd like to see that from everybody. But at the same time, in terms of pushing like public awareness of these things, I think most people, most non-psychedelic users who've never been around psychedelic use or knowingly been around psychedelic use is probably how I should phrase that, have this idea that like you take acid and like little purple elephants dance across the table, right?
Right.
You're seeing things.
Dragons.
Yeah. There's a dragon guarding the kitchen. I don't think most non-psychedelic users realize how much of the psychedelic experience is not about a change in your perception of the external world. It's a change in what you are, right? It's a change of how you're processing reality, how you're understanding your place in the world, your place between you and your parents and your friends and your job and, all of these things. It's not seeing dragons. It's realizing that in a lot of ways we go through life asleep. And DMT in particular is like, really one hell of a wake-up call for a lot of people. This realization that I have this deep fundamental belief in consensus reality, right? The thing that I'm seeing and hearing and feeling and touching, that's what's real, that's what's happening. And then you take 3 deep breaths off of a pipe and it's just gone.
Right,
It's just not there.
Yeah. It's like a guy in camouflage, like hiding in the woods, and you're like, I don't see him. I don't see anything.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you smoke DMT and he's bright orange.
He's bright orange, yeah.
Wow, now I see it. Now everything's here. It kind of deconditions you from this ideological camouflage that's been thrust upon us.
Right. And for people who have financial or emotional or intellectual investment in maintaining the status quo, these are dangerous things.
Right. Yes.
And I think that's what a lot of the drug war is about maintaining the status quo.
Yeah.
And
we can't have people thinking for themselves.
Right. Except the status quo on a dying biosphere is definitionally insane.
Yep.
This idea, it's cutting down the last tree on your island insane, right? It's, when you use the tree to make your fishing boats, it's that level of insane. It's, you're on a spaceship and you see somebody taking an axe to the wall and you're just like, well, I guess this is just how things are. People just take axes to walls, And when we're living on a planet that is so close to so many different, it's not like there's one ecological crisis, right? It's not like there's just climate change. It's like, no, like a little bit of climate change might freeze all the permafrost, which might release diseases that have been gone for 10,000 years, which might release all this methane into the air, which might, we're talking about interlocking systems that are so complex that we are just now beginning to sort of understand them.
Yeah. Which psychedelics also help you see.
The interconnectedness of these systems. And so really, I think that's the risk that people see, whether or not ideological prohibitionists actually feel that way, or if that's just like hippie paranoid conspiracy, I don't know. But it feels like that because it's hard to imagine supporting this system from I don't want people using drugs perspective. It just fails so entirely, right? It just fails so badly at the stated goals that it seems unlikely that those stated goals are the real goals. I don't know if you've ever read Drug War Capitalism, but that book also talks a lot about...
I haven't, no.
Yeah, it talks about the need to sort of control the flow of drug money. The money is actually a huge thing, right? And we know which banks it goes into. It's like, and so the control of money is a big part of it, but I'll tell you, it does feel like they are scared of this experience, or especially around psychedelics, right? Heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, the people who develop problematic use, that problematic use is potentially very problematic.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like it really can ruin those people's lives. It really can ruin the lives of people around them. It's statistically rare. It's driven by prohibition, but that doesn't change the fact that there are certain drugs that do that.
Yeah. And maybe that's the plan,
right,
so to speak.
Right. And I'm not judging people who use those substances based on that. I'm just saying that the outliers on that one they work really well for media perception around like, let's demonize drug use, right? Somebody who's really gotten problematic about their meth use is a compelling media image that can be put out there. People who've gotten really heavy into psychedelic use don't present such a compelling image, right? The guys walking their pet goats around, downtown New York are like amusing, right? They're funny. They're, oh, look at this guy in his colorful clothes and his dreadlocks. They're not scary in the way that people see those.
We could use more of that in society.
We could use more
amusing
weirdness.
goat walkers.
Right. So yeah, I'm not we've got way off on a tangent. I'm not quite sure what the original.
Hey,
yeah, it's conversation.
It's cool,
yeah,
man. Yeah. I tangent all the time.
Yeah, but what you were saying about how I think you made the comment that you see a lot of DMT use, and I think that's certainly true. I also think there's more people using LSD now than were using it in the 60s.
Sure, yeah.
I think that the amount of LSD that's being consumed in terms of like milligrams, don't consume a milligram of LSD, by the way, but the term that's being on a population
Right.
dynamic, the amount that's being consumed in milligrams.
Well, there's a lot of psychedelics being consumed, and my point was that it's kind of more spread out, decentralized, and it's happening more than I think there's. With the 60s, you had this kind of image of like
the be-ins.
the concentrated, like hippie, crazy, free love thing, and that's not necessarily happening right now. It's a different flavor of what's going on.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And there are some problems with that as well, right? I mean, we definitely see a lot of sort of like super toxic masculinity within online psychedelic culture.
Oh yeah.
I think a lot of people, a lot of psychedelic users have the perception that psychedelics will necessarily sort of push people to the left politically, right? It makes you more open and caring and loving. And I don't actually think that's true. I think psychedelics are non-specific amplifiers of creativity.
Yes.
If you're just an asshole, they make you a more creative asshole. That's all it does. It's a non-specific amplifier of creativity. Right. And creativity is good. I want more creativity in the world, but it's not a panacea to the world's problems.
Yeah.
I think the integration of the experience is what can be the panacea, right? If we can learn as a society how to properly guide these experiences, I think that could really fix a lot of problems, particularly with MDMA. MDMA is not classically considered a psychedelic. I think it actually can be quite psychedelic, but that's actually not about MDMA. It's about your body metabolizing the MDMA into MDA, right? So in your liver, the MDMA is being turned into MDA, and MDA can be quite psychedelic. The MDMA experience is one that is so predictable. Psychedelics are a bit of a wild card, and that's why people like them. They like the wild card aspect, right? It's a trip. You don't know where you're going.
Exactly, yeah. The novelty, the diversity of colors and information.
And I love that too, and I'm not knocking that. I think that's a really, really, really important and also enjoyable experience. I think it's okay to talk about these things as fun.
Yeah.
They're not just tools for changing the world or changing yourself. They're fun, and that's okay. It's okay that these things are enjoyable. MDMA is shockingly predictable. MDMA-assisted psychotherapy, the reason it's becoming the standard over like LSD psychotherapy is that psychedelics can be super unpredictable. To use the T-Fairy term, they can be tricksy, right? They can go sideways on you. MDMA, particularly real MDMA given in a therapeutic context, does what it does. And it does it really, really well. It does it so well that the FDA has now given it breakthrough therapy designation, which is like an incredible statement for the FDA to make.
Right.
I think very clearly by 2021, 2022, MDMA psychotherapy is going to be legal in this country. We're going to have to immediately start talking about rescheduling black market MDMA, because if MDMA is an acceptable medical tool, it can't be Schedule 1. That is the law. And so, marijuana weirdly has never gone through the FDA approval process, right? It's not an FDA approved drug anywhere in the world. That's why Marinol is Schedule 3, but marijuana is still Schedule 1 federally. But MDMA is going to go, it's almost done. I mean, we're in phase 3 right now. In fact, one of the phase 3 sites is an hour north of where we're sitting.
Right.
And so once MDMA is an accepted medical drug, we need to talk about the fact that people are sitting in prison for decades and decades and decades and decades for this substance. And it's unacceptable under any context, but especially when pharmaceutical companies it's a nonprofit pharmaceutical company, but it's still a pharmaceutical company, right? We're talking about pharmaceutical use of MDMA being legal, then street use cannot be treated the way that it's currently treated.
Right.
And so I really think that the legalization of MDMA is probably the next fight. I've had this conversation with Kevin, who did the Denver mushroom thing.
Yeah, Kevin Matthews, yeah.
From a purely political perspective, mushrooms make sense. They're natural. You can make them at home. They're physiologically non-toxic. It makes a lot of sense to decriminalize psilocybin after marijuana. It really does. even pure MDMA can hurt people. It can kill people. It's rare. It's usually environmental. People take it when it's too hot out, or they don't drink enough water, or they drink too much water. But people have died from MDMA. We need to be very, very honest about that fact. At the same time, the MDMA experience is so much more controllable. It's so much gentler than the psychedelic experience. It's so much more useful from a therapeutic context, both in a structured therapeutic context and also in the context of just taking MDMA recreationally. And it allows you to examine your own life without any sort of emotional pain. And that is such a difficult thing for so many people to do, to think about their own childhood without immediately just like bursting into tears, right? That it allows you to sort of self-regulate your own past trauma in a way that I personally know thousands of people who have had that experience where they've taken MDMA at a rave and they thought it was just going to be a fun night, and they like resolved major childhood trauma like on a dance floor. Yep. And like, we don't talk about it that way. We don't talk about drug use that way, but it's real and it's really common.
Yeah. I mean, I had a beautiful moment like that, you know, we were having fun. We were at a show, me and my girlfriend, we just decided, hey, you know what? There's some stuff coming up here about our relationship. Let's go lay in this hammock over here. Right. You know, and it was, I mean, we had a great time. It was beautiful.
Right.
You know? Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that after MDMA therapy is made legal, because of the way that medical insurance works in this country, because of people's lack of ability to afford therapy, I think we're going to have millions of people who are trying to access this outside of a medical context. And we're really going to need to grapple with that, because realistically, DanceSafe has a staff of 3, right? And if we have 2 million new people trying to take MDMA, I mean, we have 2,000 volunteers, but we have a staff of 3. And if you have millions of people now trying to reach these drugs, misrepresentation and adulteration are going to be huge issues. Education is going to be a huge issue. And so we're really going to need to grapple with this, not from this one small nonprofit based in Denver perspective. We're going to need a societal response to this. And we are already in the time frame for starting to grapple with this, right? Yeah. Phase 3 is going to be done in end of 2020, beginning of 2021. It might be a little bit late. There was apparently some hiccups with the manufacturing of legal MDMA that they weren't expecting, but certainly by 2022, MDMA is going to be a legal prescription drug in this country. Right. Yeah. And people are going to be people with PTSD who can't afford MDMA psychotherapy are not simply going to give up on that possibility. Right. They're not, and they shouldn't. I'm not even suggesting that they do give up on that. I'm actually suggesting that they don't give up on that. But that is going to be a major, major source of potential problems that we need to stay out ahead of. And we're not really talking about it. I mean, we're trying as an organization. DanceSafe is trying. Yeah. I have not heard anyone from the FDA discussing this. The FDA is not interested in tertiary quote unquote non-medical use of their drugs, other than how do we stop that? Right? How do we stop the non-medical use of our drugs? That's the only thing they care about.
Yeah, so they just care about that medical regulated. Right. That's the thing. But for everybody else, it's not a problem.
Don't do it.
Right.
That's the answer.
And don't do it. This isn't for you. But we know people are going to do it because that's what people do. And recently there was this thing that happened in Australia where the girl overdosed. I think she was taking MDMA. Right. Do you know the story?
Yeah. So... Yeah. I'm not sure I know this specific story, but it's actually
it's a common one.
It's a common story.
Trying to avoid being caught by the police or the security.
Right. So the police in Australia have taken to running drug dogs up and down the line at festivals. Their ability to search people is actually quite a bit more expansive than the police's ability in the United States. Police in Australia have less constraints on their ability to perform searches. People have been body cavity searched in lines at festivals. I mean, not in the line, but they've been caught in the line and then pulled into like a trailer or whatever.
Oh, thankfully.
And so people who are carrying, say, their drugs for a 10-hour party see these drug dogs coming, they panic and they swallow everything they're carrying. Right. And the plan was, I'll take one, and then in an hour I'll take 2 more, and then a few hours later maybe I'll take another one, and then I'll have like 1 or 2 if a friend wants one, or like if I really decide I want to go hard at the end of the night. And they swallow 8 or 9 or 10 capsules of what's either is supposed to be MDMA or even is MDMA. And even if your pills really are MDMA, taking 1.3 grams, particularly it tends to be a lot of young, relatively physically small women, right? And so their body weight is quite low, the brain weight is quite low, and taking 1.2 grams with no drugs in your system, no tolerance built up, is potentially fatal. MDMA at those doses is not necessarily going to kill you. There are plenty of people who've taken MDMA at those doses and not died, but it also certainly can kill you. It also makes you far more susceptible to hyperthermia. So like, not hyperthermia, like to overheating. Overheating. Hypernatremia, where you drink either too much water or not enough. Dehydration. Both of those things are actually issues on MDMA. Not just on MDMA. I mean, marathon runners used to contend with this as well. Drinking too much water can kill you.
Drown yourself from the inside. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So you throw off your saline levels, and once you've thrown off your saline levels, we're actually very delicately balanced walking oceans. And once you throw off those saline levels, the ocean doesn't work. Yeah. And it's really important for the ocean to work. Otherwise, your brain doesn't function super well. And that's what happens is you throw off your saline levels and things start to shut down. Yeah. And so people who take these huge doses of MDMA because of the security apparatus, those are another like really clear example of deaths that are directly attributable to prohibition and public policy. We as a society have made the decision that those are acceptable deaths based on our stigma around drug use. Right. That girl did not swallow 10 capsules of MDMA because she wanted to party really hard. She did it because she was afraid of going to prison. She did it because she saw a drug dog. She freaked out and she took her drugs. And it's a really common thing for people to sort of glibly dismiss these as, oh, this person decided to use drugs, right? This person made the decision to take those drugs. So like, I'm not concerned about that death. I don't care about that death. And you see that particularly in online comments around news stories. I actually have a little sticky note next to my desk right now that says not reading the comments is self-care. Just to like remind myself that like people will say things on the internet that maybe they don't even fully believe. Right. But it's really a common thing to see. And weirdly, you never see those comments on stories about people who died in car accidents, right? We made a decision to get in the car. But like, you don't ever see people blame the driver for getting in the car. You don't ever see it when somebody dies from a parachuting accident. You certainly never see it around military deaths, right? Like, this person made a decision to put on armor and go into battle. Like, that's a very potentially dangerous thing that person made the decision to do, but we don't ever blame those people for those deaths. You don't ever see like, oh, screw them. Like, they joined the army. What did they think was going to happen? You don't ever see it around those deaths. But suddenly around substance use, then you see that sort of really judgmental attitude. And that is something that is really driven by government policy. This idea that drugs are evil, intrinsically evil. Drugs are intrinsically dangerous. And if you take them, you deserve what you get. Even if all of that was true, even if all of that was the case, these people aren't dying because the drugs are intrinsically dangerous. They're still dying because of government policy. And there's a tiny handful of MDMA deaths that we can't explain. There are a tiny handful where people took them in
that's
cool
always going to
environments.
happen, right?
But that's on a population dynamic. That's always going to happen.
Yeah.
Give me 0.3% of the drug war budget. We can probably develop a pretty simple blood test for screening these people, right? I think there's probably metabolic and genetic things at play that we could figure out pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, you brought up, people dying in cars and things like that. And I think at the Good Cinema panel, you brought up cheerleading as being
cheerleading,
like a cause of death that's very high that outweighs these things. And David Nutt, I think, wrote a paper about, I forget what it's called, like equine deaths. The amount of deaths that occur from riding horses is far higher than MDMA.
Right.
But for some reason, and even, going back to when I was talking about the decriminalization of mushrooms, talking with people who are mushroom users or things like that, they would say, you try to explain these kinds of things and like, look, there's more deaths here, there's more chance for accidents here, but because of that framework, like we were saying before, it doesn't get through because the stigma is so heavy, the conditioning is so heavy. So what are some things that DanceSafe and yourself are doing to kind of further that conversation along? Where are the inroads? Like, where can we make the conversation happen? Yeah.
So I think, public talks is a big part of it, right? I try to speak at a lot of festivals rather than just like boothing festivals now. My personal time is taken up quite heavily by speaking at festivals.
Nice.
Yeah. Some festivals are very receptive to it, some less. Every party that Tipper throws, he lets me get on stage, on the main stage for like an hour and talk about drugs, which is amazing. Yeah. He's a really huge supporter. That's one part of it. I think another part of the conversation is around encouraging substance users to come out to their peers about their substance use.
Come out of the substance closet.
Right. Coming out of the fractal closet. And I really think, a conversation with parents and grandparents can be super powerful, right? Around, I've used these substances. I had great benefit from these substances. I also think a major part of what we do, our core mission of harm reduction, is the fight. That is the fight, is actually minimizing the number of deaths that happen.
Yeah.
Right. So every festival we're at, where we're doing testing and we're educating users.
Oh my God. Yeah. I've seen your table. It's like you could spend the whole day there getting educated on all the stuff you guys have.
Right. And so by providing that education, by providing testing on site, we minimize the number of deaths, and every death is a media firestorm that moves the conversation further into that prohibitionist model. Even though these deaths are caused by prohibition, that doesn't change the situation. Yeah. And so really that's our place in the fight, is minimizing these deaths while we're operating under the system of prohibition. Man, if we could get like 3 months with no drug deaths, that would be like a major conversation, right? Right now the conversation is so heavily focused on opioids, and it makes sense. More people die from opioids every 2 weeks than have died from MDMA since it was invented. And so I understand why the conversation focuses there. I understand why the money for harm reduction goes to opioid harm reduction. I fully get all of that. I actually think that focusing molecule by molecule on decriminalization, legalization, reform, I think is a mistake. I think that's a tactical mistake. I think what all of us should be doing, it's awesome. We legalized psilocybin in Denver. I'm super proud of the work Kevin did. I think it's incredible that not just Kevin, I mean, there's a whole team. Kevin sort of is he's the most public one out there. I don't know who else can be named by name.
Yeah.
But I was so proud of the work they did. At the same time, I think it's really important that we not continue a molecule by molecule fight. I think what we really need to be talking about is the harms of drug prohibition as a system, the fact that of all drugs, most users do not develop problematic substance use, including drugs like heroin, methamphetamine, and cocaine. Most users of those drugs do not develop the DSM criteria for problematic use. They are definitionally recreational users. And so we are spending billions and billions and billions of dollars on a system that's designed to mitigate problems that are really about prohibition and about a small percentage of users. And so if we can take the money that's going to prohibition and retool it towards education, harm reduction, medical treatment, we could end drug deaths. We could end them. And when you're talking about something that is now the leading cause of death for people under the age of 40, right? Leading cause of death in all 50 states is substance use for people under the age of 40. We cannot continue with the same sort of piecemeal fight. We are in a crisis. More people are dying from substance use now than died from HIV at the height of HIV deaths, than die from cancer, than die from gun deaths, than die from car accidents. It's a huge number of people. We are losing an entire generation of people to this issue. And it's an issue that we can fix really, really easily. It's so rare that there's big problems that have easy solutions. Yeah. And in this case, there is an easy solution, and it's to stop causing the deaths.
Right.
We are causing them, so stop causing them.
I would love for us to repurpose, for our government to repurpose the money and put it into education instead of spending, $785 billion a year on defense and, prison and all this stuff. That might not happen, but there is the private sector. There's donations. Is that possible? Do you think that's possible? Question one. And question two, if DanceSafe were to get like a huge donation, say like $1 billion from someone, then you guys would be able to do a lot of really amazing things, right?
Yeah. $1 billion seems unlikely.
All right, let's say
let's say 10 million.
10 million.
I mean, look, if someone wants to give me $1 billion, I'll take it tomorrow.
Yeah, me too.
I think that the financial constraints are real. They severely limit what DanceSafe can do. A lot of big donors historically have been hesitant to publicly support harm reduction. Even people who support medical research have been hesitant to support harm reduction.
Right.
Again, drug war stigma harming the situation.
Got to come out of the closet.
I think that there's a lot that DanceSafe can do to mitigate the harms of prohibition, this really does require governmental change.
Okay.
This really does require public policy change. And so DanceSafe has been sort of slowly getting involved in that fight.
Okay.
So in a lot of states, drug testing kits are considered paraphernalia. No one's ever been arrested for just having a test kit, but if they find a test kit with your drugs, they'll charge you with a paraphernalia charge, and it makes people hesitant to sell them, right? Like retail stores. We have now changed that in Colorado. It's test kits are now completely legal in the state of Colorado.
Right.
And so we're working on a retail rollout plan so that they're going to be available in head shops. And we've actually been in conversations with officials with the Denver County government about the possibility of doing drug checking days at Denver County health clinics, particularly now that drug possession in Colorado, as of, I believe, March next year is when it changes, will be a misdemeanor, not a felony.
Yeah.
So now we're just talking about police ignoring misdemeanors for harm reduction purposes, not ignoring felonies. So that's going to be very helpful for pushing the conversation forward about doing public drug checking services in Colorado. But the old joke, the first step to healing a wound is you pull out the knife. And I think really the knife is prohibition, and we really are still, the knife is still in the back of our body politic. And I think DanceSafe can do a lot to sort of stem the flow of blood, but really healing the wound is going to require changing government policy.
Yeah.
It's going to require major change in how we treat drug use at a societal level. And I don't know if that change is going to come from the left or the right. I mean, it could come from either side. It really could. This is a civil rights issue from the left. It's a cognitive liberty and freedom issue from the right. This is an area where I really think we could see real bipartisan action and real bipartisan support.
I mean, I'm laughing because I'm thinking about how quickly the Patriot Act passed.
Sure.
And it's like, we are capable, the government's capable of making vast changes very quickly. But then, when it comes to things like this, it's a lot of slow, bureaucratic, paper pushing and red tape. And
I don't really like, my personal politics are quite far to the left. But on this issue, there are certainly Democrats running for president now who are arguably worse than Trump on this issue.
Yeah.
On the whole, I'm not saying they're
Biden.
Biden is a real good example.
Didn't he write the Rave Act?
He did. He wrote the Rave Act, which makes DanceSafe's work very difficult. He also co-authored the Patriot Act. Bill Clinton oversaw the largest growth of private prisons in the history of this country. There are Democrats out there who are real law and order prohibitionist Democrats.
Yeah.
And so, this is not a left or right issue. This is a civil rights, cognitive liberty issue that really should unite us on.
Oh, totally.
And we really could
agree.
use a few issues that unite this country. It would be lovely to have a few big changes that really bring the country together. And I think this is one of them. I think this is an issue where we really can find common ground with people from all sides of the political spectrum. Because even if you don't use drugs, you are being massively taxed and massively harmed by the war on drugs. Civil asset forfeiture has absolutely hit people who had nothing to do with the drug trade. They were just robbed by their government.
Oh my God, yeah. I think I remember that reading this study in 2015, civil asset forfeiture surpassed actual reported crime and robbery and theft.
Right. So the
police stealing
the police
your money.
Steal more than criminals, literally, like in terms of dollars. Yeah. And for anyone who doesn't know, civil asset forfeiture does not require conviction in a court of law. Your property does not have the presumption of innocence. Your property is actually presumed guilty, and then you have to go to court and prove that you didn't earn the money illegally.
A lot of people don't know that.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're not charging you. You'll actually see court cases that are like, the state of Florida versus a 1987 Chevy. Like you'll see that court case, and that's who they're charging. They're charging the car.
Right.
And then you have to go to court and prove that you didn't buy that car with illegal proceeds. And you have to have attorneys, and often the cost of doing that is higher than the cost of the thing they took. And so it's just not worth it from a dollar's perspective to go get your stuff back.
And the people that have a lot of money typically have power and control too. They can get out of that. These systems are created for them to find the loopholes, right?
And also there's so much discretion with law enforcement that realistically, if they pull over somebody in a brand new Mercedes coming out of a very nice building, even if they think
he's black,
and
and
he's black, the odds of them seizing that car are a lot higher than if he's white.
Right.
regardless of his job or income, and that's just a reality. It's absolutely the case. There's tons
Happens
of statistical
all the time.
data, right?
Yeah.
Right, and we have tons of statistical data to back that up. That law enforcement really does behave differently with different races.
Yeah.
And yeah, with civil asset forfeiture, you're really just sort of out of luck. I mean, it's really just, it's up to you to have the ability to go fix this, and most people don't have that ability.
Right.
And so that's where it's at. And we know this is happening to innocent people. I mean, it's happened to innocent people. And so even if you don't use drugs, you have a dog in this fight. You have a reason to not be supporting this system. And also just recently, I don't know if you saw, there's a police officer in Florida who was just indicted for planting methamphetamine on hundreds of people. He planted methamphetamine on.
Yeah. Yeah. Dave Chappelle famously joked about this in his special. Just sprinkle some crack on him and get out of here.
Right.
But with good comedy, there's always truth to it.
Right.
And this is happening.
Right. And people that he planted methamphetamine on lost their homes, lost their jobs, lost their children in some cases. And the ability for police to do that, even if they're just few and far between bad actors, the ability for them to just like randomly create crime like that doesn't exist without drug prohibition.
It's like this broken window theory of fixing things.
Yeah.
Well, if we create, if there's enough problems, then we can create more jobs for police, and they can solve them. They're incentivized to ticket and arrest.
Right. And police get, they get raises and promotions based on conviction rates. And boy, planting drugs is a really quick way to manufacture convictions. I mean, the drugs are there. They had the drugs. And so like, that's it. The drugs are there. And these people were getting convicted of drug possession and going to jail, and the police officers were getting bonuses and or police officer. There's only one that was known to be doing this in this particular department. But, I from a purely sort of like job protection understanding of things, it's hard to imagine this is a one-off. It's hard to imagine that no other police officer in the country has ever been like, oh, you know what? Like I can literally just like plant little baggies all the way to my retirement.
Yeah.
Like I can,
and then you're a hero.
And then you're a hero.
Yeah.
I was the highest number of drug convictions of any cop in this county. The idea that doesn't happen really often seems unlikely. It seems very unlikely.
Yeah, that's a warped perspective of how we measure protection. To protect and to serve. Right. They're supposed to be doing that.
Right, and cops have a really difficult job. Like I've never had anyone shoot at me as part of my job, so it's hard for me to judge the mentality that develops when you're like really under siege.
Sure.
But a lot of why they're under siege is because we've created artificial profits from through drug prohibition.
Yeah, they've also gotten military grade weapons and training from the war on terror that beefs it up even more and more. And you know how men in suits with guns feel I'm Batman, I'm rolling around in a tank, I'm doing stopping protesters.
Yeah, it's a nasty system, and it's interlocked with so many other things that it's hard to imagine how we're going to unwind this.
Right. Yes, that's the question that I want to ask you, because I agree with you. We need to act now.
Yeah.
I was on this panel the other night, and I was saying that if you're taking psychedelics with the intention of healing and growing and these sorts of things with a real intentional purpose, it's not enough to just keep doing that. We need to actually act in this world to do things, because I don't believe in this incremental, get the ball to the first down.
Right.
Although that is what's happening.
Yeah.
What else can we do? What would you? I guess in your ideal vision.
My ideal vision.
To see.
We would see a coalition of left and right politicians coming together to have this conversation about the harms of prohibition and how to mitigate them. Right. Looking at the international example of other countries that have moved in this direction. So somebody once told me that somebody who had a reason to know this once told me that every major social change looks impossible the day before it happens and inevitable the day after.
Yes.
Right. So the idea that women would someday be able to vote the day before was impossible, and the day after was inevitable. The idea that we would end slavery the day before was impossible, the day after was inevitable. Liberating concentration camps, defeating the Nazis. All of these things looked impossible. The Berlin Wall falling. And so my hope is that drug legalization, or rather the legalization of cognitive liberty, the legalization of our ability to control our own minds.
Right, the freedom of consciousness.
The freedom of consciousness is one of these fights that the day after we fix this is going to look inevitable. We're going to look back and say, how could we not have done this? And I really think that the medical research is going to play an important role in that. I think that's going to be a huge part of it. I think people who use psychedelics and other substances non-problematically, people who are using them in ways that are not causing harm to their lives, coming out to the people around them and telling them about this. I understand there's very real legal risk there. I get that. I'm saying if you have the ability to do that, it's something that you should do. I think is going to play a huge part in that. This might be one of these situations that takes mass nonviolent resistance. This might be one of those things that takes people physically shutting down the wheels of civil disobedience, massive civil disobedience around cognitive liberty.
Yeah.
And we really are talking about a civil rights fight. This is not a fight about substance use per se. This is a fight about either we own who we are, we own our bodies and minds, or our bodies and minds belong to the government. That's what this comes down to. We're either free or we're not. And there isn't a lot of gray in my mind in this conversation. And it ties in really heavily with the abortion fight as well, right? The way that Roe v. Wade was decided was on this idea of privacy rights, right? A woman has a right to medical decisions about her own body, and the privacy of her own sort of intrinsic bodily autonomy protects her from government control of that decision. It's really hard to imagine how that same argument doesn't apply to substance use, right? If that is a right that humans have to their own bodily autonomy and to their own privacy about their decisions they have made with their own bodies, they either have that right or they don't.
Right.
And in my mind, we just fundamentally do. We are fundamentally free to make those decisions, along with the responsibility to deal with the consequences of those decisions.
Yeah.
But the government should not be making those decisions more dangerous. That's not an appropriate response.
Right.
If a person takes powerful psychedelics in an unsafe environment and jumps off a building, it's very, very sad. It's an individual tragedy. It is also the result of their decision-making process, and that should not have any consequence on other people who want to engage in that substance use.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So a person who, does 140 on the highway and spins out of control and dies is not a reason to ban cars.
Right.
And we shouldn't talk about substance use that way. And that's how we talk about it now, right? Look, if we legalize psychedelics, people are going to be jumping off buildings. It's like, even if that's the case, and I don't think it is, even if that's the case, that's not a reason to continue the criminalization of these drugs.
Yeah.
And so we really have to be pushing that in the public perception, this idea of fundamental cognitive liberty. We have a right to our own bodies and minds.
Yeah.
We own them. They're ours.
Yeah. My body, my choice. My mind, my choice.
That's it.
Yeah.
I think that having that conversation loudly and publicly is going to be a really important one, because it ties in with a million other fights that are going on this planet. I mean, we talked about, the realization of the interconnectedness of ecological stuff coming from psychedelics, but also just from like a environmental protection side of things, just from the drug production side. Producing drugs in black markets is very environmentally toxic.
Right.
And it's really easy to do it in a way that's not toxic to the environment if you're doing it legally. Right? There's nothing intrinsic about manufacturing MDMA that requires you to cut down Cambodian rainforests. It's just an easy source of black market saffron oil, and so people do it. And so this huge amount of deforestation was happening because of MDMA production. Thankfully, there's a new precursor in town that has substantially mitigated that, but certainly with cocaine production, the dumping of chemicals in the rivers in Colombia and Belize has become a huge issue. People producing meth, just like dumping their chemicals in the United States, is a massive environmental issue. And there's just a million different fights where this all ties in together. I really think the biggest one is with MDMA assisted psychotherapy in particular. People often come to this realization that they don't want to fight wars anymore. Soldiers often come to this realization that they have no interest in the warfare state, right? And our society spends so much money on what we call defense, right? But is really the protection of for-profit military contractor proceeds. It's really the protection of petro business overseas. It's about resource development and resource extraction.
Yeah. Opium production in Afghanistan.
Opium production in Afghanistan. All of these things are tied together.
You think that's... I don't have the evidence, but I'm pretty sure if you look at the... we've been in Afghanistan for 17 years or more, whatever it is, 18 years, and the opium pandemic.
Yeah, it breaks the record every year. Yeah, the amount of opium produced in
coincidence? Or
yeah. Right, and we're now at the point where children whose parents were part of the first wave in Afghanistan are in the military.
Yeah.
So we have generational fights in Afghanistan now.
The saddest thing about that is that the people that are being born, they're into this. This is just the new normal for them.
Yeah.
So, younger kids, 20, 21, they don't even really realize. They're just like, well, this is how it's always been, right?
Right. And what have we gotten out of it? I mean, what have we gotten other than proceeds for a very small percentage of people? A lot of money. A lot of money's been made.
Yeah. And we keep heading more and more into the disaster zone. But, DanceSafe and what you're doing and, hopefully what I'm doing and just furthering the conversation along, trying to educate people, get this out there, come out, talk about these things and all the other things that we can do. Maybe, even getting involved in politics, right?
Yeah. No, I think running for office is super important. I think both at the local level and state and federal level. But even having people on debate stages who are saying this would be such a game changer, right? If one presidential candidate would come out and say, I'm not talking about legalizing pot. I am talking about ending prohibition. We're talking about ending the drug war as a system. We're talking about letting every federal prisoner who is in prison for possession go. Tomorrow. Yeah. I'm going to sign a piece of paper and every person who's sitting in federal prison for simple possession is free. I think that is such a no-brainer for so many people. We spend so much money incarcerating people, far more than it would cost to send them to Harvard. It makes sense to segregate a certain people who are violent criminals. I am not suggesting we let those people roam the streets. It makes sense to have a place where people can be sent to keep them away from the rest of society if they are a real danger to the rest of us.
Yeah.
But that is not the statistical reality of people in prisons. The statistical reality is most of the people in prisons are there for victimless crimes. And that is simply unacceptable that we have built this massive prison population. Like I said, the largest prison population in the history of the world, both in absolute numbers and in percentage of population in the United States today because of the drug war. People just accept it as the new normal, but this isn't normal. This isn't the historical norm. The idea that we would ban people using certain drugs is the historical anomaly. Most civilizations throughout the history of the world did not restrict what drugs people could take at all. Some of them restricted it sort of tertiarily, these drugs can only be used certain times. Ancient Greeks had the Eleusinian Mysteries.
Heroin o'clock.
Heroin o'clock.
The Eleusinian Mysteries, right?
Right.
Such a crucial period.
A crucial period of our Western civilization's development, clearly driven by psychedelics, but it was psychedelic use that was tightly controlled.
The Kaikion.
Right. But it wasn't like you could take it home, right? You had to go to a place to use it.
Yeah, it kind of fell in line with like the Huxleyan view,
right?
Of like let the kind of intellectual class, distribute this.
Although I think the mysteries, anyone who had not been convicted of murder could go. Right? So even slaves.
Yeah,
even
as
slaves
long as you were a resident.
As long as you were a resident, you could go do it. And so maybe that's the model for legalizing psychedelics, is having a place where psychedelics are legal, right? Having a place where anyone who wants to go and use psychedelics can use them. I'm actually a larger fan of the idea of broad decriminalization. I think that treating possession as a criminal thing is never helpful. But if distribution happens at psychedelic centers, I'm pretty okay with that.
Yeah.
But what we're doing now is not just a failing system, it's a failed system.
Yeah.
Drug prohibition is not falling, it's fallen. And the ultimate proof of that is that in the civilization where we have the highest percentage of prison population in the history of the world, in the civilization where the police can simply take your money on the theory that it was generated through drug crime, in a civilization where our Fourth Amendment rights have been massively eroded, our First Amendment rights have been massively eroded, in a civilization where we have taken the drug war almost to the point where we just treat society as a prison, we are losing more people to opioid deaths than ever before.
Yeah.
There's nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
And people are dying of opioid deaths in maximum security prisons.
Right.
So even if we did take it that far,
they're even getting it in there.
They're getting it there. So even if we took it to the point where police could stop you on the street and cavity search you, where the Fourth Amendment didn't exist, they could search your home at any time, where police could shoot suspected drug dealers on the street with no repercussions, even if we took it to that extreme, it wouldn't fix a thing.
Yeah.
And so that's it. The system has fallen. We need to build a new one. It's just about forcing the political class to realize that the system has fallen because they're so insulated from it.
Yeah.
The people who run this country, the people who are the sort of political leadership of this country, they don't generally buy drugs. They buy doctors, right? They can get their pharmaceutical amphetamines, no problem, right? Sleep shift disorder, right? Or, I need my Xanax to fly, and I need, they get all the drugs they want.
Whatever they want, yeah. Steroids, anything.
Anything they want to get, they can get.
Yeah.
It's really just those of us who don't have money and power that are forced to go through the system of the black markets.
Right, yeah.
And
classist, racist system.
It's a classist, racist system by design. And they're so insulated from the effects of it that it never occurs to them that this has become a rotting wound in our country. But boy, when you see the number of opioid deaths now, it's really hard to ignore that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the solutions that we're hearing are solutions that in general would make it worse. And I think we're running close to time.
Yeah.
So I'll give one quick example of a solution that would make this so much worse. Yeah. If you look at a distribution of opioid deaths in this country, it's very clear that the fentanyl crisis is hitting port cities the hardest. It's not cities along the U.S.-Mexico border. It's cities that have lots of numbers of shipping containers that enter them where the fentanyl crisis has hit the hardest, and they sort of radiate out from those cities. Areas that are connected to the traditional Mexican heroin distribution networks have a lower number of opioid deaths than areas that don't, because it's not heroin that's killing people. It's when the heroin gets too far away from its source, it's been stepped on so much that it doesn't work.
Yeah.
People cut fentanyl into the heroin, and that's what kills people.
Right, to maximize profit.
To maximize profit. And so if we did manage to build a wall along the southern border and completely cut off the supply of actual heroin, we would see an explosion of fentanyl and fentanyl analog deaths in this country that I think would dwarf what's happening now. I don't actually think we're in the middle. People always say, we're in the middle of the worst opioid crisis in history. I think in some ways we're at the beginning of it. Fentanyl is a very powerful drug, and the reason people use it is that it's easy to smuggle. And the harder you make it to smuggle drugs into this country, the more you encourage dealers to switch to more potent analogs. And there's no way to stop a drug like 4-fluorobutafentanyl, which has something like, I think it's something like 500,000 potentially fatal doses in a gram. You can't stop anyone from smuggling a gram of powder into this country. You can't stop people from smuggling a gram of powder into Supermax. Right. And so if you force people to switch to more potent analogs, you're going to see more deaths. You're going to see more overdoses. You're going to see more transports. You're going to see more of these problems. And so it's this idea that you can't solve a problem with the same level of thinking that created it.
Right.
And we are in a crisis created by government policy, created by prohibition, and more prohibition is just going to make it worse.
Yeah. We have this gaping wound on our side.
Right.
And we just keep putting Band-Aid after Band-Aid after Band-Aid on top of it.
And now we're talking about bigger knives.
Right.
We're going to fix it with a bigger knife.
Mitchell, this has been amazing.
Yeah,
I could talk to you for 17 hours straight, man. This is awesome. I think we covered a couple of the questions here, some of them from the Psychedelic Club of Denver. So let me just move on to... here's one. The criminalization culture setting. How does the criminalization culture setting affect the mindset of psychedelic users if that increases the number of people who have negative experiences at shows?
Yeah.
Did we get to that? Or?
No, we didn't.
Okay.
One of the really interesting dynamics when you read psychedelic history is that this idea of a bad trip didn't really exist when it was like a bunch of graduate students at Harvard using LSD. They didn't really even realize that these negative experiences were possible. In their mind, it was this universally positive experience. It was really only with the crackdown and the criminalization and the spread of really just outright lies. I don't even want to call it misinformation. When the government says that LSD can shatter chromosomes, they're lying, right? They knew that was a lie. That we started seeing all of these sort of problematic experiences. And so, I think this is another really good example of a thing that people point to as a reason why drugs need to be illegal that's actually created by drugs being illegal. I think if psychedelics were legalized through some sort of site model or a licensing model where you had to go get your license to use LSD, we could virtually eliminate these problems. Not entirely. Psychedelics are tricksy. They can go sideways.
Right, yeah.
But I think the reason they often go sideways is a underlying paranoia and fear created by prohibition.
Right. Yeah. And I got a question here. This will be the last one from Matt Kale of Veterans for Natural Rights. He wants to know if they can train some of our veterans on drug reagent testing kits for harm reduction.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always happy to do trainings. We're actually getting ready to roll out, hopefully, a fully online drug reagent training program so people could go online and learn how to use these things very, very easily. The instructions are pretty self-evident. The sort of hardest part about this is getting people to actually read the instructions. You'll often have people who sort of slip into this, it reagent tested properly, so it's pure, right? They slip into that mentality. And so really just teaching people over and over and over again that that's not what reagent testing means, right? It means primary composition. It means statistical probability that it is what it's supposed to be. It's not a certainty. It doesn't mean the drug use is safe. It just means that there's a high probability that it is the substance you thought it was going to be. But yeah, I'm always happy to do training, certainly with, I think veterans in particular are really turning to the black market to try to treat their PTSD because the current the current treatments are so ineffective that they have friends who went through phase 2 MDMA therapy. They see how helpful it was and they immediately try to go access this on the black market.
Right.
And so, yeah, happy to do that and chat with him about that because I think it's really important that anyone who's accessing any drug outside of a regulated context has to know that they need to chemically analyze that drug. Yeah. One of the hardest things to train people out of is this idea that they trust the person they got it from.
Right.
Of course you trust the person you got it from. You were buying drugs from them. You I think very few users in the history of the world bought drugs from someone they didn't trust, right? That's intrinsic to the process. It's not about trusting your guy. It's about understanding that misrepresentation happens very high in the supply chain. It's about your guy, who I promise you, no matter what the drug is probably not a guy you would hang out with.
Right.
Like 5 up the chain in any drug distribution network, there's probably somebody you would not want to bring to dinner.
Right. Totally. Yeah.
It's just the nature of the game because there's so much money involved that it requires a certain type of person to be involved in that business at that scale.
Yeah.
Again, because of prohibition, there's nothing intrinsic about the drugs that drives this dynamic. Yeah. It's just the drug war.
But if people were getting it from like David Nichols or, Rick Strassman or people like that.
Right. If there was a legal regulated system where you could go to the Rick Strassman DMT Center, I would love to see the Rick. I mean, that's what we're talking about, right? Is if you could create a center where people could go and access these things legally, it would not only eliminate misrepresentation, but I think substantially mitigate difficult experiences.
Yeah.
Because there's a difference when you're about to go into a powerful psychedelic state of being in a criminal black market or being in a place where it's accepted, known, understood, and you've had to go through a whole training process about how to use these drugs.
Yeah.
And so, I do. I think that's the solution is the creation of these legal markets. And until then, everyone just needs to understand that black markets are intrinsically adulterated, intrinsically misrepresented. And if you don't personally chemically analyze the substances you're taking, you don't know what they are.
Yeah.
And that's it. You just don't know.
Totally. Yeah. Guys, go to dancesafe.org, find out all the information there, donate, volunteer. Mitchell, where are you going to be at next?
Burning Man. So if you're coming to the Burn, I will be publishing my schedule hopefully in the next 2 weeks. It'll be on the DanceSafe Facebook page, on our Twitter. It'll be everywhere. I have 2 talks hard confirmed, 2 more soft confirmed, and 1 more potential. So I will certainly be speaking. Actually, really quickly, let me. My phone is off. I don't know how much time we have. Let's see how quickly I can get my phone turned on. I'm going to see if I can pull up my schedule. But there are sort of 2 really big psychedelic speaker camps at Burning Man this year. So Palenque Norte is a speaker series that's been going on, for decades and decades and decades. It was actually a speaker series that McKenna was heavily involved with way back in the day. And so now Palenque Norte happens at Burning Man. I'm speaking there.
Is that Lorenzo Haggerty that organized that? Bruce Damer and Lorenzo Haggerty?
That's not who I've been talking to, but I'm not. There's a lot of cooks in the.
I think they used to.
Yeah. So hold on, let me really quickly. I'm almost
Sure.
there, guys. I promise.
Well, while you're saying that, I'll just also mention that you guys have a YouTube page too, Facebook, Twitter, like you mentioned, and dancesafe.org is just a great website. And I recently made a resources list on my website. So if you go to mikebrank.com, you'll see DanceSafe there at the number 2 position.
Oh, excellent.
Only Arrowhead above you.
Oh, that's really touching. No, that's really touching.
Yeah.
So Tuesday of Burning Man at 4 p.m. I'll be speaking at Palenque Norte, or it's actually 4:30 p.m. I apologize. 4:30 p.m.
What date?
Tuesday, 8/27.
Okay.
And that's going to be a group talk with Rick Doblin, the Executive Director of MAPS, who does all the medical research, and Betty, who's the Executive Director of Students for Sensible Drug Policy.
Great,
So the three of us will be speaking together. The talk is Prohibition and Post-Prohibition, How to Create a Rational Drug Policy in the 21st Century. So
awesome. So if you want to hear more about what we were talking about, go see that when you're at the Burn.
And then Wednesday, 8/28, I will be speaking at... so the large foam camp that's there every year is doing a speaker series for the first time. The camp this year is Fomogenesis, and the speaker series is Entheogenesis. So I'll be speaking Wednesday, 8/28 from 4 to 5 p.m. And that's going to be a talk about harm reduction in the festival and burn communities, and how we can sort of create a culture within those communities that harm reduction exists as an intrinsic part of that community, not something that's necessarily provided by the festival. Right. If we can build a culture of harm reduction, then it's less on the backs
kind of
of
like a self-governing culture
self-governing culture of harm reduction.
Very much needed. Yeah.
And so those are the 2 talks that are super hard confirmed, and I've blocked off large chunks of time after each of them, because last year I had back-to-back talks, and there was all these people I really wanted to talk to, and I constantly had to run off to my next talk.
Yeah.
So I'm very intentionally not doing that this year. So if you want to chat with me in person, that's the way to do it, is find me at those 2 talks. And I also made really awesome Burning Man pendants to gift out this year, and if you want one, that's how you got to come to my talks, and I'll find me afterwards.
Well, I hope to see you there. Maybe there's a chance I might be there, and if anyone else is going, let me know. I'm still in need of a ticket, but we'll figure that out. Thank you so much, Mitchell Gomez from DanceSafe. It was a pleasure, sir.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, it's great seeing you.
Thanks for being here. Peace out, everybody. Stay safe. Hey, I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Hope you guys like these podcasts and enjoy them. And if you do, please spread the podcast, share it, tell a neighbor, tell a coworker, tell a friend, tell a cat, tell a mouse, tell a dog, tell an ant, tell a firefly, tell whoever you tell. Share it, spread it, like it, all that good stuff. If you really love the show, you want to go a step further, you really want to help us out, leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, and go to patreon.com, Patreon/Mike Brank, and patreon.com/Mike Brank, and you can donate as little as $1 a month, $2 a month, whatever you want. Help support the show that way as well. But remember, I love you guys no matter what you do. I just love that you tune in and you enjoy these podcasts. Message me. I like hearing feedback. Get in touch with me on Instagram, Micadelic Podcast, Mike Brank on Facebook as well. And thanks to our sponsors, Synchro and Hemp Bombs. If you want a discount on ketogenic and plant-based nutrition products, go to Synchro and type in the code Micadelic at checkout to get 20% off. And they have amazing ketogenic chocolate fudge called Keto Mana that I have all the time because it has like no sugar and carbs in it. So it's great. And it's delicious. And if you want CBD, go to hempbombs.com and get 15% off all your CBD needs, I guess. And just enter the code Mike15 at checkout. But thank you once again to everybody. Thanks to Danny Barnett and Galaxia for the music, the intro and the outro. I love you all. Peace.